and welcome to another episode of Spot Talk. I'm your host, Mansa, and today we're talking about Minneapolis. ICE has been raining down terror in Minneapolis for some weeks now, and it looks bad. 2 people have been murdered in broad daylight, Renee Good and Alex Preddy, and that's just in Minneapolis. Other cases are less talked about, but there have been at least 7 others shot dead, and many more have died in custody. How far will Trump and ICE go before they are forced to stop? That is the question. Our comrades have been on the ground in Minneapolis in the middle of it, going to the various protests, including what's being called the general strike on the 23rd of January. So to give us a sense of what it's like on the ground, the mood, the terror, the reactions, the fight back, and all the rest, I am joined by Comrades Paula, who's back in Chicago now, and Jeremy, who's still in Minneapolis. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, thanks for making the time to have this really important discussion right now. And Jeremy, especially, you're recording from a car in some parking lot, so I appreciate you doing this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so look, you guys have been on the ground. We've been hearing all kinds of things from the outside. I want to just start by talking about the real raw details. Like, what has your experience been like? What's it like being in Minneapolis recently?
Can I address one thing you said in your intro, which I'm really glad you brought up, is that there have been many others who've been murdered. Like here in Chicago, Silverio Villegas Gonzalez was shot down, murdered by ICE. And if you notice in the press, they keep making this big, what Renee Good and Alex Preddy's, that was just execution. But they're saying, but these were American citizens, as if this was even more outrageous than all of these others being gunned down because they weren't documented or they're here, quote unquote, illegally. And so, these are all things that should be eliciting outrage, whether you're dying in custody or being murdered by ICE. So just to put them on the radar too.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, there's horror stories about ICE picking up kids, 5-year-olds, kids from school, throwing them in detention centers.
Yeah, watching these border control agents in action, you get a real sense of what the treatment is down by the, Mexican-American border, what people are getting down there.
Yeah. Definitely. I did think it was important to mention that because, some names make it into the news, others don't. So, let's talk about what's Jeremy, since you're still in Minneapolis, maybe you want to start by talking about what's it been like?
The moods have changed over the, course of 3 weeks, starting from like somber and angry attitudes, and leading up into the next week when the general strike was about to take place, the quote unquote general strike. There was a lot of enthusiasm going into it. And then, the following week after Alex's murder, pretty much really pissed a lot of people off and has kind of geared people up to continue to fight a little more. At the same time, though, with Trump backing off, there's also like this sense of victory, which kind of, leads people to believe, I think, that, they're getting close to the end of this, end of like this kind of fight for defending immigrants with the legality of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll come to what exactly is maybe next in terms of Trump and his, anti-immigrant offensive. But give us a bit of a more of a feel. So you started by saying the mood changed. So what was it like after Renee Good, and then a week or 10 days or so later, Alex Preddy? So what exactly was the mood before, and how and why did that change in your estimation?
Right. Well, we went to Renee Good's memorial site where she was murdered. There's a big Somalian presence. You have people serving tea, food, dropping off stuff to the memorial, letters, flowers. And, a lot of people just kind of quiet and comforting each other, really. And, I'm not really sure where it kicked off. I think, just people noticing how ICE is really affecting people around the nation. It kind of sparked this, initiative to rally some bigger demos. Or the general strike, or what was called the general strike. And I think, I'm not really sure what led up to the unions wanting to really organize. I think, there's a lot of socialist alternative members out here within the unions that probably pushed around their weight to, broaden this fight against ICE and defending immigrants. But that really, and then you have the noise demonstrations outside of the hotels where they believe ICE is staying. And those tend to be typically more like a party, honestly, more than anything.
What's a noise demonstration?
So a noise demonstration is where people just bring instruments, anything, tubas, trumpets, cans, anything that makes a noise, and they go outside of the hotels and try to keep them awake all night so they can't sleep. Yeah.
I mean, I think what you saw was like just as various groups, and it sort of started sinking in after the shock of Renee Good's murder. And then don't forget, I mean, 5 years ago, this is where George Floyd was murdered, just a few blocks from where Renee Good was shot, literally just walking distance. And the outrage really started kind of growing and anger. And there was like people out in front of the federal building where ICE would report for work and, just screaming at ICE agents, sort of without a direction. It was just like almost hysterical, frenzied. And I will say that, some of the left have supporters in the unions, but most of them went along with this, calling this an actual general strike. And you saw like pretty much any worker in Minneapolis that has any sense of history. Minneapolis in 1934, there was a massive general strike where the Teamsters were built. And I mean, they really went against the rules, talk about, just shut things down. And so you had this growing anger to do something. And then the more they pushed this as a general strike, the union leaders I got in front of it to make sure it didn't go too far. They hid behind the no strike pledge, which they themselves authored into these contracts as a way, we can't actually call the union out, but we encourage everyone not to go to work and call in sick, and therefore leaving it up to the individual.
Look, I mean, you guys are there. We'll get to some of what Workers' Vanguard has written on this question as well. But look, as far as I'm concerned, all of social media was like Minneapolis came out for a big general strike, and even sort of like these progressive media channels, they all hailed it as that. And that's not just the American ones, but out here, across the pond, that's the news that we're getting. But that's also what the left is pushing, that this was a general strike. Now, you have to so explain this to a non-American audience. First of all, why was there a sentiment to come out for a general strike? I get that there was like real anger. People wanted to get ICE out, so they wanted to fight. And then
there are hundreds. I don't know the number in Minneapolis, but there are ICE agents everywhere, and they just descend on a neighborhood and come and just round people up. So a 5-year-old had been rounded up. Renee Good was murdered.
I heard actually that there's a lot of people who leave their house with their papers, with their passports, etc. Is that really okay?
They carry their passports with them all the time, and any kind of documented papers, which, as we know, doesn't really make a difference to
that
ICE.
Sounds dystopian as hell. I mean, that just sounds crazy.
I mean, I believe where Alex Preddy was murdered, that's just a lot of restaurants and stuff. I think I heard he was just out to breakfast, like people filming all that, sort of, the ICE agents just show up. And that's why they have various legal observers. People will descend on a particular neighborhood to defend people against ICE. And if you go in there and try to rescue them, as you saw what happened, ICE will just, they drag this woman out of her car. She literally was driving to her doctor's, and they stopped her. They start screaming at her. They pull the door open. She goes, "I have a disability. I'm disabled. I'm just going to the doctor." They drag her out, took her down, to ICE. There's been numerous union members who've been dragged in to the detention center. and then you go to work in the morning and then you're gone for days, weeks, over a month. That's not uncommon at all, where you don't know where your loved one is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that was another driving factor in why the unions have decided to pick up a role. I noticed a lot of the teachers union, the MFE 59, which they had been impacted by a lot of ICE agents near schools, messing with teenagers, teachers, dragging them around, really compelled the teachers union to make a statement and kind of join the fight. And on top of that, the regional AFL joining, pushing, organizing as well, and mobilizing workers.
Yeah,
but to a degree, not actually mobilizing the unions themselves, but showing their sympathy at least.
Yeah, they were definitely pushing to get out there, but we'll get to that. But yeah, I mean, it really was this, which is true in a lot of the big cities. Minneapolis is the most concentrated and obviously kind of the extreme of what's happening. But even here in Chicago, you walk through some of the Mexican neighborhoods and it's quiet. You go through whole neighborhoods and the usual hustle and bustle is just not happening. And in Minneapolis, it's just intensified because of the number of ICE agents and just the sheer brutality of how they're carrying this out.
Yeah, I actually have a question before we get into the general strike that obviously you guys want to talk about, which is why Minneapolis? Like, what exactly is it about Minneapolis that ICE is really making a huge offensive there? Like, I know it's a large concentration of the Somali diaspora, right? Like, is that why? Or what is it?
I would think some of it is there's a huge Somali population. Minneapolis is a labor town. It's a labor city. It has a long history of labor. And it's, I don't know how much, it's cold as hell up there. Maybe they thought they could, I think it's a lot of things going into it. And this is the birthplace of Black Lives Matter with George Floyd. So, I think there's a lot of factors would be my guess.
Okay. And Jeremy, you already mentioned that when you went to where Renee Good was murdered, there was kind of like this more somber mood of, community vibes and so on. What about the Black community? Have they been in the protests? I've seen videos and reels online where a lot of Black youth have been confronting ICE, for instance, at like different intersections and like trying to block them out of neighborhoods and so on. I'm just wondering like how the different dynamics play in terms of the different groups involved in the anti-ICE movement.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of Somalian students who are active in, fighting against ICE. We talked to a girl last night who was actually wanted to talk to us about what do you do when you're scared, like when your family's scared. So you have some of the younger Somali youth coming out and fighting and also concerned for their family and their neighborhoods and safety. Like I said, at Renee Good's site, the day we went there, the first week I went there, there was a big Somalian presence and they were all active in, the community. I haven't seen that same kind of presence anywhere else at any of the demonstrations, but there are a lot of individual youths working with other leftist organizations, immigrant organizations. On top of that, a lot of Somalian business owners joined into the general strike. There's a big Somalian mall out here that was affected by ICE, and they agreed to shut down their businesses for the general strike. So
yeah, coming off that, another indication of just the fear of what's happening, and I see this in Chicago too, is you go to a restaurant or a little, bodega or cafe, and you have to knock to get in. They will come and let you in so that.
Oh, you mean the doors are locked?
The doors are locked, and you have to ring a bell or knock on the door to get in so that ICE can't just barge in at any particular point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, thanks for painting the picture. I mean, it sounds pretty scary. All right, so let's come to, you guys have already referenced the the big protest on the 23rd of January, which is being billed as a general strike. There's actually, I saw earlier today, there's another call for a national shutdown or some kind of general shutdown on the 31st of January. But let's put that to the side. So what was this? You guys were there as part of this?
Yes.
Yeah. So why do you keep saying it's not a general strike? What's your beef?
Well, I would sum it up when I was talking to people there. If you're riding a bus to get there, get anywhere, and your packages are coming, your mail is delivered, the schools are open, that's not a general strike. Is when labor shuts the city down. The unions call out their membership. Nobody's working. Nothing moves. Nothing goes. Planes don't come and go. The transit, factories, etc. And so what was very frustrating is they were twisting it was great that I think there must tens of thousands of people came out January 23rd. They were just pouring.
It's very cold. Yeah.
It was minus 20 without any wind chill or anything. And people just poured in. And but they, really bastardized what a general strike is by just saying everybody come out, and turned it into the sort of this individual effort, like don't go to work and close your business. And I actually talked to this small shop owner, this Black woman who I saw her at one of the protests. She's like, I'm so torn because I really hate what ICE is doing. I support these protests, but I'm barely making it. And if I close down, that really puts me in between a rock and a hard place. And so the union leaders were able to latch onto that and sound very militant. I mean, if you listen to some of what they say, the head of the bus driver ATU was, we're going to shut Minneapolis down. Teachers union, same thing. No, nothing's going to happen. But it was all through individual effort. They didn't even mobilize contingents of unions. I saw one union banner out there, the SEIU.
So then why would they say we're going to shut things down, but then proceed to not do so? Doesn't that make them look silly?
It's almost like they're trying to redefine what a strike actually is. Like I heard, for example, the other day, think of like the restaurant unions trying to go on strike. Usually it's a portion of the workers that are on strike, apparently, and while the restaurant's still going, they call it a strike, even though the restaurant's still operating while they're trying to fight for a union. I think it's kind of a mishmash of just the terminology of what a strike is. I don't think people really have a great understanding of what an actual strike consists of and on what basis, like mobilizing people as the whole organization and not just these individuals inside these, unions or these restaurants that are fighting for a union or better conditions or better negotiations.
I mean, I think the other thing, so Workers' Vanguard actually once wrote a new leaflet called Labor, Make ICE Stand Down. And this was written after the 23rd of January, after the day of the quote-unquote general strike, because was it exactly one day after you have this big protest, and exactly one day after Alex Preddy is murdered in broad daylight. The next morning. So I think for anybody who's trying to kind of see, well, did this work or not? I don't know. You guys are on the ground. You guys are actually interacting with people who are under the gun right now. But I would think that if there was a big show of force, then ICE would think twice about acting as recklessly and as brutally as they've been doing. So I don't know. Did that sort of dampen the mood that after this big protest, ICE went and killed another person?
Yeah, I think there's a few things going on because, if the unions had mobilized even solid contingents throughout with their union banners, that could have given ICE and Trump a little pause for thought. I don't, not that things may have been different or not. And I think when Preddy was gunned down literally within hours of that march, because there was euphoria. I mean, absolute euphoria at that march, and people just, I'm sure Jeremy heard it too, just comments, wow, that was fantastic. We really showed them. And then Preddy was murdered, and it's just like shock. Like, what the hell happened?
Mhm.
And now you see things shifting a little. Bovino being the head of ICE being pulled out of Minneapolis, and some of this, which I have some thoughts about. And so I think the demonstrators, and maybe Jeremy would have a better sense, see the demonstration as the reason for all of these shifting around by Trump. Whereas I would argue it's, the fact that Preddy, he was sort of like, here's this like man who's loved by his coworkers, an ICU nurse for veterans, loves animals, he's in a union, is murdered by helping this woman who's been pepper sprayed by ICE. And I mean, there's so many videos of that, and it's impossible to deny that this man was just killed in cold blood.
Mhm.
And I think like that's caused such a ruckus. Like even New York Times is, having blow by blow, that maybe pulling back, trying to paint this as anomalous, or make ICE a little more respectable, and it reminded me of like what the Workers Vanguard and ICL press has been saying about how Trump will just push, and then when he faces some resistance, he'll kind of recalculate. And I'm kind of wondering if maybe there's some of that, because I mean, this has caused so much tension between Trump and the gun rights groups.
Yes, that was another thing, because Alex Preddy, Alex Preddy was armed. He's concealed. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So there's, I believe, even the NRA?
Yeah, the National Rifle Association.
Who's putting pressure on Trump to investigate or something along those lines.
Well, they're because for people that don't know, in the U.S., most gun rights organizations are very conservative, with the exception of the Socialist Rifle Association.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Few
cool.
exceptions who are pretty awesome. And very active, and very, their membership, as you might imagine, has been growing as well. But so they're saying, hey, first of all, they're calling this a protest that Preddy was at, which was not really true. But they're saying, wait, you have conceal and carry. You can go anywhere you want. I mean, think of all the protesters at the January 6th capitalist protest. You better believe they had a bunch of, guns under their jackets. So they see this as a potential attack against them too, and their right to carry. So you have this funny, like, clashing and coming together, and this little Venn diagram of their intersected rights, which is an important thing to really bring out and exploit. But so, I think the bourgeois press makes a much bigger deal of these tensions, but they are there,
And speaking of the right, I seen a sign that said, Republicans against ICE. Mm-hmm. And I think it like paints the picture that when you're, you could have any ideology you want, but when you're in a community with people that have all different types of ideologies, and someone close gets kidnapped by ICE or shot, it affects them too. And, it really changes the hearts of, even Republicans who were maybe pro-ICE before or pro-Trump, to take a look again at, what they were actually standing for. So the closer home it gets, the less reactionary they start to become, maybe, and consider like some more empathy or compassion towards their community, and could disrupt all their beliefs, really.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I've been sort of seeing the slow, steady stream of articles about the contradictions of the MAGA base, right? Like on different questions. I mean, right now, Trump's approval ratings are taking a bit of a dip because of the affordability crisis. I think part of what this ICE situation, I think that obviously probably has something to do with it as well. So, and Paula, I think what you said about, Trump will kind of bulldoze ahead and see, does he hit an obstacle? And if he does, he'll kind of, put the brakes on.
Yeah.
But that's really his modus operandi. That's how he works. And it remains to be seen where this will go. I think it's a broader discussion, which we can get to. But yeah, I do see the point about maybe thinking twice amongst some MAGA supporters, like, whoa, this is not exactly what we're for. We don't want white American citizens being gunned down by law enforcement, especially those licensed to carry. I think that's kind of like, whoa, we didn't sign up for this. The black and brown people may be fine, whatever. But at the same time, I was looking earlier today, Fox personality Megyn Kelly. She had this like very provocative thing saying, you know why I don't feel bad for Alex Preddy? It's because he shouldn't have been butting in when law enforcement was trying to do their job, right? So there's also that, which I think is also where the other side of the MAGA camp is going to go. Like, oh, look, these guys are just trying to do their job. Like, what's your business trying to, defend some woman that ICE is attacking or whatever? So there's a whole mess of consciousness right now, I think, in going on. Just it's there is a lot going on, and we don't have answers to all of this, but I think the reason why I want to kind of just bring out all of these different aspects is to paint a picture right now of what is America, because looks pretty bad. Okay, so let's go to the point about the sense of victory. So, Paula, you mentioned that if the unions had actually just organized contingents, like actual presence, maybe 50, 100, 200 members, I don't know, whatever we're talking, if they had actually come out as organized union members, it would have given ICE some pause. And again, I think I'm kind of left wondering, they came out, the union leaders, talked very left, said, we're going to shut things down. But then they didn't actually do it and instead encouraged their members to, do individual sick outs in order to make some kind of an impact on the bosses. At the same time, you guys are talking about the fact that this demonstration, there was this like huge mood of like euphoria, that we're out here trying to do a thing and we want to stop ICE and so on. And the next day, Alex Preddy is killed in cold blood. So what has happened since then in terms of this sense that we've achieved something or not? What's happened since?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's a sense of victory among the community members. Mm-hmm. Still, I think they want to push a little bit more, even though, Greg Bovino's gone. ICE's numbers out here are dwindling down. I mean, there's still people being arrested in these smaller areas like St. Paul and Duluth or whatnot. But and we went to a rally last night at the Government Plaza where, we still have people trying to pressure the Democrats again and try to trying to harness or limit ICE's power or function or to make it more accountable in the courts for the people. People still want accountability for people want Jonathan Ross arrested still. That's
the man who murdered Good.
Yeah, that was the ICE agent that murdered Good. All the people that were murdered by ICE, no, there's no accountability so they're trying to still push the leaders to do something about that. And there's some of these organizations that aren't really working with the unions as much as others, more liberal organizations that are still hell-bent on pressuring Democrats to do something for their city. And, a lot of it, too, is about the law enforcement. We seen a lot of people were thinking that the Minneapolis Police Department was going to help defend the citizens against ICE. Well, the exact opposite happened, and it was almost like it shook people up. For us, it's like, well, yeah, duh. But some of these people were, thinking that the Minneapolis Police Department was going to do something against ICE. And I think, there was a lot of contradiction in the talk, too. I mean, there was speakers saying, we need to move this fight forward, make it national, shut down more, and then other people, trying to reform their way to a better, more, safer ICE program. So there, I mean, there's still a bit of, a victory, like a sense of victory. Like I said, ICE has dwindled, but I think they're still trying to push a little more. Right now, the whole block where Alex Preddy was murdered, a lot of the community members are out there and in the streets just mingling with each other. I've heard speeches about, organizing the unions as well, which, I wanted to talk about that for a second, because a lot of the unions that were trying to get their members on board with fighting against ICE could only go so far, because the union tops won't, even release a statement if it wasn't within the framework of what was allowable. A lot of these maybe committees or caucuses inside the unions were trying to get together to do something, but they don't have enough support from the members or even the leadership. So they would release a half-cocked statement that really possibly didn't have all the things they wanted to say or the right things they should have said, but they just kind of watered it down to be acceptable for the statement to be released by like the union itself. So I know I jumped back there, but yeah.
I was going to say some of this false sense of victory, because, ICE is not stopping from rounding people up and throwing them in jail, and there'll be more that die murdered. But even today, like there's all kinds of press today about Walz, the Democratic Party governor of Minnesota, who, by the way, called out the National Guard not to defend the protesters, but to give backup to the sheriffs in the cops in Minneapolis. But Walz and Frey, the Democratic Party mayor, who's like been completely
ICE, get out.
Nothing. Yeah. He talks as, ooh, we're so mad, we're done. And then, that's it. But both of them have come out with statements about their quote unquote productive talks with Trump. And, so, all of them really want to lower the heat in Minneapolis, because it was red hot last week. And then Preddy being murdered. It's, all you hear is people, we're in fascism. We're living under fascism. This is, we got to do something. And so that's some of this false sense of victory is very narrow too, like just Minneapolis.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate you laying out the sort of mood there, and I think, Jeremy, the way you describe how difficult it is to fight in the unions, because these tops, these leaders, are so tied to the Democrats and they play by the rules, and the Democrats are out here trying to make ICE accountable, as you were explaining. I was looking at the leaflet that WV published called Make ICE Stand Down, and they're kind of explaining, what do they want to do? Governor Walz advises video recording of ICE activity when the feds themselves are regularly posting videos of their own violence and brutality, So it's like, well, how is this a strategy to change anything? No. Yeah. And the mayor, when Minneapolis first started to get hot, there was a real viral clip of his where he was making this bombastic speech about, ICE needs to get out. But yeah, you're right. As a statement makes a point, like, what has he actually done to make that happen? So the point is, the Democrats out here are not actually doing anything that's gonna help people, and the union leaders are doing totally what's acceptable within the frameworks of the rules that are set by these two parties. So it feels like there's a real chokehold amongst actual rank and file militants who do want to do something, because okay, fine, this wasn't a general strike, but there was some union folk who came out as individuals. All right, fine. So I guess let's get to it, because Paula, as you were saying, ICE is nowhere done. We'll see what exactly is going to make Trump stop. My personal take is that, I think Trump has to kind of think twice. They've, reassigned the head of ICE or whatever. But this does not mean that his whole anti-immigrant offensive is like done. Of course not. We'd be idiots to think that. So the question that's still posed is what to do. And this is where I want to come to what we should be doing, right? What should be done. And I assume you guys have been having conversations along those lines when you've been on the ground trying to talk to people and address their real concerns and so on. So I guess let's get to some of the points of how to make ICE stand down. And really, I mean, we've been talking about the unions throughout, but it is through the unions. It's just the unions are not where we want them to be. Yeah. So maybe one of you guys can start by just laying out what the main point we're trying to push right now is.
Yeah, I was going to just make a quick comment of what I think what Jeremy was referring to earlier is we've talked to people in smaller craft unions who say we really want to do something, but our coworkers are very reactionary and this and that. And so their response is to sort of water down rather than have the discussions and fights with their colleagues. Mm-hmm. We've been really pushing, organize your coworkers to push for a mass meeting on what to do about ICE, or bring your coworkers to the, like we talked to some people in the lead up and said, well, are you guys allowed to bring a union banner? Like, what are the discussions you've had in your union to really make this real? And when they, what do you say to your union leaders when they say, oh, we can't do this and that? Because a lot of the people we spoke to just really do feel powerless. Like, well, they're the leadership. I'm just a member. And so trying to instill a little bit of, well, no, you guys can organize and talk about these things and hold the union leadership feet to the fire and fight for new leadership if they're not going to do the job.
I mean, on the opposite end of that, you have, I don't know if I should call out individual names of union leaders here, but there is one with the CWA, the president, who has actually...
What's the CWA?
Communication Workers of America. They have about 350 members in that union, in that local. The president actually has been very bold, speaking out, way more, bold than any other union president as far as going up against Trump and what it's going to take. But then again, he has no members that agree with him. So it's...
You mean they're all pro-Trump?
I mean, they're not all of them, but,
a lot of them.
Yeah. I'd say, because no one showed up to the general strike really from his local. So, it could have been that none of them could have called out, or none of them were capable of. But, it was kind of just the opposite side of the spectrum in the case where rank and file members are trying to push their leaders, where in this case, it's the leader that's trying to mobilize his workers, but they're not really listening.
Well, they've had 2 members swept up last month. So... how about taking some action then when your members is swept up in the raids? But we certainly know that there are plenty of individual, for instance, ATU. There was a small group of ATU members we ran across who were there on their own.
That's the transit workers.
Amalgamated Transit Union. And their president has been one of the more militant about shutting Minneapolis down. But then you talk to some of these workers in the unions, where we ran into a bunch of electricians and we're talking to them before the demo. And we said, okay, well, so are you guys going to come out on Friday? Well, I have to work. And if I don't go to work, I'm going to be screwed. And which is, another reason to actually have a bona fide strike.
Let me just, clarify. So what exactly was the demographic of this big protest that happened on the 23rd? Because we're talking a little bit about the contradictions of the labor movement, right? Some people who just weren't down for it, others who may have showed up as individuals. So, what was this demographic?
Well, I would say because there were no organized union contingents, I have no idea what percentage of that demo was unionists. Honestly, I'm sure there was lots of workers out there.
Yeah.
The age range was wide. There was a number of Latinos, Blacks, Somali youth. It was tens of thousands of people, but and then they all marched to what's called the Target Center afterwards, where some of the bureaucrats, like Randy Weingarten, spoke, who's the head of the American Federation of Teachers, and kind of pushed, the idea of you can have solidarity just by, wearing the colors of their union, or instead of put your ass on the line, and because again, the whole point, if labor doesn't have a show of force, then it is just going to remain kind of begging for the bosses to be better, and let's have more laws. Trump is being slammed with all these lawsuits, so there's illusions in that. There's illusions in the Democrats. When we would talk to people, they like, so what do you think the obstacles are to getting your coworkers to doing this? And we got accused a few times of, oh, you're so negative. You just want to talk about the obstacles. We're like, but you have to if you want to get over them, if you want to, get rid of them.
I mean, this is something we've talked about a fair bit on this podcast, about there's a need for a real force, a real show of force against Trump. To defend the class and the oppressed. That doesn't seem to exist right now. And okay, fine, this was a bit of a, people came out, the union leaders sort of acted left and talked left and so on. But from the way you're describing it, it's far from where things need to be to actually make ICE stop. And I'll just go back to how this leaflet that I referenced earlier, Labor Make ICE Stand Down, how it ends, that a real labor fight back is a matter of life and death, not only for immigrants and their defenders, but also for the unions themselves. So this is what's really at stake is, like, how are you going to defend the immigrant population, but also how that defense necessarily goes hand in hand with defending the labor movement, which is going to be next if this offensive isn't stopped. And I think that, when we put it like that, it kind of sounds really overwhelming because that's what's needed, but we're far from making that happen. It's far from where things are at. And, as you're sort of, I think, explaining, a lot of illusions are going to go into the existing channels that are out there, legal channels, the Democrats, and so on. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm not negative in the sense of like, what are you talking about, the obstacles? But I think there is this sense of like, it kind of reminds me, Jeremy, as you were saying about the young Somalian woman you were talking to last night, about what do you do? There's real fear, there's real obstacles, but what's needed is like a real show of force by the working class. So I don't know what I'm asking here. I guess. Go on.
That when we would talk to people about tear up the no strike clause, that got a huge hearing. People were very much for it.
Yeah. And just for context to non-Americans, so many unions, it seems, in the United States have actual contracts that they're not allowed to strike. Yes.
Yeah. Or they have to go through this ridiculous long process, like the union admin. You have to file 90 days ahead, 30 days ahead, and have cooling off periods. Like they're all geared towards not striking.
Exactly. It's a way of chaining the labor movement in its ankles. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, go on.
And some of the discussions I found were very useful. It's like in Minneapolis, it's glaring. You really can't separate the fight from defending immigrants to the fight to defend labor, because there have been so many union members caught up in this and jailed. There was a bus driver who was in detention for over a month. No one could find him. And it's like, and that does appeal to people who maybe are a little bit hesitant or buy into some of this anti-immigrant stuff. And it's like, well, hey, look what's happening to these people. And then now there's good and pretty, but your union members are being rounded up. These are your union brothers and sisters who are targeted, and you're in that target too. You're not out of the bullseye, and try to link that together. And like, and to sort of, that's where the power is, to have a real show of force and a collective fight on the part of the unions.
Yeah, I was trying to think about it, and there's so much like effort for community organizing and this localization of politics that it's almost a belief that all we need is community to fight back against ICE. A lot of people don't really make the connection of labor being the biggest power we have that's capable of actually being a threat to ICE, to Trump's regime. And that's like, it's hard to watch, like this love and unity is all we need to fight ICE. But the real issue is a lot of people do not connect this fight with labor as a force capable of stopping Trump.
I think that's really spot on. I totally agree with you. I have a question though. Why don't they link this to the labor movement?
Good question. I mean,
labor tops have been pushing the same thing.
Yeah.
They're so tied to doing everything, supporting the Democratic politician, getting the vote out. I mean, there's so many unions, mine included, when they talk about union organizing, really what a lot of those organizers do get people to register to vote Democrat. And, there's the labor movement has taken such a hit over the last few decades, and has, each contract give up a little bit more. I'm sure labor bureaucrats didn't think 30 years ago, what can we do to make the union movement as weak as possible in the next 30 years? But that's, their behavior of tying the unions to the Democrats in particular. Sometimes it's the Republicans. And giving up each time, often without a strike. You look at the potential that was there with the United Auto Workers a couple of years ago, Boeing workers, Longshore. Like, there's enormous potential, but if you're not flexing your muscle, people don't see it. They see what they're doing, lobbying. And the left, the left in this country plays right into it.
Look, we haven't talked about the left. I don't necessarily want to, but maybe we should, just very quickly, because I know that the Revolutionary Communists of America, they have come out and said that what happened last weekend was historic. I believe that's their headline. Let me just double check. I don't want to be slandering anybody. Yeah. The 2026 Minnesota General Strike, historic turning point, by one Bryce Gordon from the USA. This is what, the communists are saying in the country. And I know, Paula, you've already kind of taken some digs at this. The left, really helps the union tops with their credentials and so on. But why does the left have this completely opposite view from what you guys have been telling me?
Socialist Alternative had a headline, Minnesota ground to a halt, which that's just fantasy, pure fantasy. Left Voice was talking about labor, this important advance of the labor movement. And, I think a lot of it is their political program, not really fighting to break through that. They don't, even in my union, there's a lot of left, people in these various groups, supporters of these various groups, who cheer on the current union leadership that is, hand in glove with the Democratic Party.
And I think, we tried to make a speech at this Defend Palestine, Stop Genocide demo last week, and they wouldn't let us speak because we just bring people down. And I think that's a lot of it, is that people are just afraid to look the hard truth in the eye and tell like the reality as it is, maybe because of their own errors, but also I think more so because, if you're not constantly feeding people this good news, it's almost like, or where we're getting somewhere, it's almost like they're afraid they're going to lose momentum with their movement or something. So it's really about just feeding hope to the people instead of the reality, in order to, either lift their own organization up or to keep people in high hopes, so they'll keep, feel like they're actually doing something to make a difference.
Yeah,
Yeah,
not
I think
looking
that's
at
a pretty
realities.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty insightful take on how they work. Yeah, but also it's severely diluted because the movement is not where it needs to go, So I think by embellishing it, it just really actually sabotages the actual course. It needs to not be here, but actually, it needs to be in a much stronger position. So it's only by calling a spade that you're going to then kind of start cracking those existing obstacles.
Yeah, they're very delusional about these things.
Pooh, the SL always bumming everybody out.
Yeah.
All right. Look, Jeremy, you're still on the ground in Minneapolis. Are there still protests happening? What's happening?
Yeah, we've got usually like 3 to 4 things lined up each day.
Oh, really?
We don't
what?
have our whole week planned out, but day by day, we typically find some kind of press conference, demonstration outside of, the local officials' buildings in a park somewhere. And then also there is still the memorial and the site where Alex was killed. That's got a lot of people there still. And typically, like Renee's site, people were there for probably nearly 2 weeks, up to, 200 down to like 15 every day. So I imagine Alex's site's going to be quite the same. But yeah, here it's scattered out. You'll see the same people jumping from one demo to the other. It's like we're all following each other in a car 20 minutes away to see each other in this new spot and talk about something else. So
the left. What's generally, I mean, we kind of touched on this here and there. What's been the reception to the leaflet or the general views that you guys are pushing?
It's been really successful. Last week's statement, we handed out roughly 800 leaflets. We had people reading them right there, agreeing with us.
This was the one
This was the one for a real strike.
Make it a real strike.
Yeah.
So this was before January 23rd, called Let's Stop Frontin' for a Real General Strike. Yeah, okay, cool.
Yep, and we just got our new leaflets yesterday. We passed out maybe 50 to 100 so far. We've talked to a couple other people in other organizations who are, probably going to talk to us, later about it. DSAer. We are, going to this rally right now at the Capitol in St. Paul. Hopefully we can get some out, but it's inside the Capitol. So, everybody's gone, I guess. So, we're still, this is our second day here with the new leaflet. So we're going to get them passed out and all of them, and we'll see how people feel about them soon.
Yeah, I had people taking, because I was, up there helping support this. And I had people taking a little batch of leaflets, literally stop and read it. And then, passing more out to people. There's a lot of openness, but trying to sit down and turn that into something is what we really need to be doing.
Yeah. Well, look, I want to thank you guys for taking the time to tell us what's been happening. Jeremy, you especially from your car. I hope the situation improves, but it's hard to say, I think. And I think that's what's depressing and what's concerning. So, we hope there's no more ICE killings, but unfortunately, I don't think that's going to be true. And we hope that there's the growth of a real fight back. And, let's start drawing some lessons. Let's start posing those poo-poo questions that people don't like. I can see that, but there's a need for it. So,
but to try to, the flip side, what Jeremy and I saw was sort of, if you don't feel like you have any answers except to yell at ICE and march around, that really begins to turn into demoralization too. And there's so many people that really do want to fight and do something and take some action. And so harnessing that.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, look, if anything else happens, hopefully you'll come back on the show too. Yeah, when. Hopefully you'll come back and report back and update us on that. Before I do go, I want to tell our listeners that this is the Jeremy you hear at the end of the show.
Yeah. All right.
So thanks, Jeremy.
You're welcome.
All right. Yeah. Okay. So good luck out there. Stay safe. And thank you again for your time. Appreciate it. And we'll call it a day there.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Well, I ain't got no smoke, at least not with you. And I don't know if you don't know, but there are just a few of oligarchs and capitalists profiting massive profits, holding us down in lockstep. And your vote, it ain't gonna stop